The enemy came like shadows, emerging from the bush with weapons in their hands and hatred in their eyes. It was not a battle of equals. It was an ambush, a strike designed not just to kill our soldiers, but to wound the spirit of a nation. In that brutal hour, over 50 brave Burkinab warriors fell. Their rifles fell silent, their hearts stopped beating, but their sacrifice began to speak louder than any weapon. The news spread like fire across the land. Mothers dropped their baskets, fathers froze mid-sentence, and the markets that usually roared with life fell into a stunned, heavy silence. Our people mourned, not in whispers, but in wails that rose to the heavens. The weight of grief pressed upon us like a mountain. Yet beneath that grief, something else began to stir, something older than fear, something stronger than sorrow. We remembered that our ancestors, too, had faced storms that threatened to wipe them from the earth. We remembered that the history of Africa is written not by those who knelt in defeat, but by those who stood, even when standing meant dying on your feet. And so the loss of our soldiers did not become the seed of despair. It became the spark of transformation. That day, President Ibrahim Traoré stood before the nation with eyes that carried both fire and tears. He did not speak the language of empty consolation. He spoke the language of truth. They have struck us, he said, but they have not broken us. Every drop of blood spilled today will be a seed from which new defenders of this land will rise. And rise they did. The tragedy ignited a movement. Farmers laid down their hoes to take up training in defense. Students traded afternoons in lecture halls for drills in the dust. Even the elders, too old to fight with weapons, fought with their words, telling the young the stories of past resistances, reminding them that a nation that forgets its heroes becomes a nation that cannot defend itself. The enemy thought they could frighten us into submission. Instead, they woke the sleeping lion. The loss of 50 soldiers became the vow of millions. This was no longer just a fight for territory. It became a fight for dignity, for history, for the right to stand on African soil without asking permission from anyone. The tragedy became our test, and from that test, we emerged not weaker, but sharper, more united, and more determined than ever to ensure that those 50 would not die in vain. The enemy had given us wounds, but we turned them into weapons. The air changes. You feel it before you see it, the steady rhythm of a man whose walk is not weighed down by fear. His name is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, and he carries with him the unshakable posture of a man who refuses to kneel before anyone but God. From the first day he stepped into leadership, the world expected him to play by their rules, to smile politely at foreign dignitaries while quietly signing away the future of his people in exchange for loans, debts, and empty promises. They thought they could charm him with handshakes or intimidate him with sanctions. But they quickly learned that this was not a man who could be bought, and certainly not a man who could be broken. In every meeting with foreign powers, he speaks with the clarity of someone who understands the game and refuses to play it. When others talk of, he asks, at what cost? When they speak of partnerships, he asks, who truly benefits? He knows that history is filled with African leaders who started strong but ended up on their knees, signing documents they did not write, in languages they did not speak, for interests that were not their own. He has vowed not to be one of them, and it is not arrogance that fuels him. It is memory. He remembers the villages where children still fetch water from miles away, while billions in aid flow in and out of bank accounts in foreign capitals. He remembers the farmers who work from dawn till night, yet still cannot compete with subsidized imports that crush their markets. He remembers the young graduates who hold diplomas but no jobs because their industries were sold before they were even built. This memory has sharpened his resolve. In the halls of international negotiations, he does not bow his head or soften his voice. He speaks for the farmer in Dori, for the mechanic in Ouagadougou, for the mother who wakes before the sun to feed her children, And when he speaks, he makes it clear. Burkina Faso is not for sale. But perhaps the most remarkable thing is this: his refusal to kneel is not only for himself, it is a call to his people. He stands as a mirror, daring every Burkinab to see themselves not as beggars, but as builders, not as the world's charity case, but as the authors of their own destiny. His strength is contagious, a kind of courage that spreads like fire in dry grass until entire villages stand taller just because they know their leader will not bend. And so the world watches him with a mix of fascination and fear. They know that a leader who refuses to kneel is dangerous, not because he threatens them with weapons, but because he threatens them with the one thing they cannot control: a free and unafraid people. They have told Africa for decades that progress comes with a price tag, and that the price is always written in a currency we do not control. They say that if we want roads, we must borrow their cement. If we want factories, we must borrow their machines. If we want jobs, we must borrow their money. And with every loan, they ensure the interest costs more than the dream itself. These are not chains of iron, but chains of credit, and they bind tighter than any shackles our ancestors ever wore. But we chose to break them. I refuse to let Burkina Faso be a nation forever, signing away tomorrow just to survive today. A country that waits for permission to build will wait for eternity. So instead of sitting in air-conditioned hotels, sipping imported coffee with men who had never set foot in our villages, I went to the people. I went to the welders whose hands were calloused from years of unrecognized work. I went to the engineers who had ideas but no backing. I went to the farmers who knew the land better than any foreign consultant with a clipboard. That is how the Rasco Baba boiler was born. Not in some European factory, but here, under our own sun. Every component came from African soil and African skill. The iron was forged in the relentless heat of our furnaces. The paint was mixed by local hands that knew every shade of our dust and sky. The rivets were shaped in workshops that had once been silent, struggling to survive, now roaring with the sound of creation. This was never just about building a machine. It was about proving a truth they never wanted us to know: that when you build from within, you create more than a product, you create power. Not the kind that comes from politics, but the kind that comes from self-reliance. Every rivet we forged here was one less dependency abroad. Every bolt we tightened was one less excuse for foreign control. We could have taken the easy path. Import the boiler ready made from Europe, slap on a Burkinabé sticker, and call it local production. Many nations do exactly that. But I wanted our youth to witness the process, not just admire the product. I wanted them to learn the skills, own those skills, and pass them on to the next generation. Because a skill in the hand of a young man or woman is a passport that needs no visa. Around the Rasco Baba project, an economy began to grow. Transporters found steady work hauling steel and finished goods. Women's cooperatives began packaging and branding. Mechanics opened repair hubs in towns that had never seen industrial service before. Metal forges that once stood silent worked day and night. And the money stayed here, circulating in Burkinab pockets, feeding Burkinab families, fueling Burkinab dreams. We did not just make a boiler. We made a declaration: we will not rent our future from others. We will build it ourselves. And when you build from within, you own not only what you make, but the respect that comes with it. And respect, my brothers and sisters, is worth more than any foreign loan. They told us that the key to progress was education. But what they did not say was that they had designed the key to fit only their own locks. They built schools not to awaken our children's minds, but to align them with foreign dreams. They gave us history books that began with their arrival and mathematics that calculated only how much we owed them. They taught us the geography of their rivers and mountains, yet left our own maps incomplete. And so, generation after generation, we graduated not as builders of Africa, but as apprentices for the world beyond our shores. I have walked into classrooms where the walls are cracked, where chalk is scarce, but where the eyes of the children burn brighter than any electric light. They do not lack intelligence. They do not lack ambition. What they lack is an education that speaks to their reality. A child in Burkina Faso should not spend 12 years in school only to know more about European kings than about the soil in which his food grows. A girl should not leave the classroom knowing the square root of a number, but unable to purify water for her village. We decided that had to change. We began rewriting what it means to be educated. Our classrooms became more than rooms with desks. They became workshops, farms, laboratories, and fields. Students learned not only how to read and write, but how to weld, how to irrigate, how to design machines, how to turn raw materials into finished products. We taught them the history of their people, the struggles of their ancestors, the victories that the world pretends never happened. We made them understand that the wealth of Africa does not lie buried in the ground. It lies in their own hands, waiting to be shaped. And something began to happen. I saw boys who once dreamed only of leaving the country start drawing blueprints for factories here. I saw girls who once felt invisible take leadership in agricultural cooperatives, teaching their parents new methods to grow more with less. This was not charity. This was not imported wisdom. This was our own knowledge, sharpened and applied to our own needs. When education reflects reality, it produces more than employees. It produces creators. It produces minds that no longer ask, "Where can I find work?" but instead declare, "I will create work." That is the power of a curriculum rooted in truth rather than illusion. It gives our youth a mirror in which they see not a shadow of someone else's success, but the face of their own potential. Because the most dangerous thing for those who want Africa to remain dependent is an African child who understands their own worth. That child will not be a servant. That child will not be for sale. That child will stand unshaken in the wind of our ancestors and say, "I will build and I will build here. I have walked the fields at dawn when the first light spills over the horizon and turns the earth gold. I have seen the hands of our farmers, cracked and hardened, yet gentle as they press seeds into the soil. This land has always been our foundation. Before there were borders, before there were flags, there was the earth beneath our feet, the one inheritance that cannot be stolen unless we give it away. Yet for decades, they have told us our land is unproductive. They have stood in air-conditioned offices and declared our soil poor, our climate harsh, our crops too few. And then, in the next breath, they have offered to help by taking it from us, by leasing it for 99 years, by giving it to foreign corporations who plant not food for our children, but exports for their markets. I have seen fertile land lie unused because the people who live on it were told it belonged to someone else. Someone with papers, someone with power, someone far away. That is how a nation starves while its fields are green. We refuse to let that cycle continue. We began returning the land to the hands of those who work it. We taught new irrigation methods to turn dry seasons into growing seasons. We introduced techniques to enrich the soil without expensive chemicals that leave us dependent. We gave farmers the tools to process what they grow, to turn grain into flour, fruit into juice, cotton into fabric, so that the wealth of the land stays with the people, not with the ships that carry it away. And I saw transformation. Villages that once survived on imports began feeding themselves. Women formed cooperatives to store and sell produce, breaking the grip of middlemen. Young men who had left for the city returned to work the fields, not as laborers, but as owners. Because the land is not just a resource, it is a teacher. It teaches patience, resilience, and respect. It teaches that what you plant today is what you will harvest tomorrow, and if you plant nothing, you will reap nothing. This is the lesson we must carry beyond farming, into how we govern, how we build, how we dream. Those who wish to control us know that a people without control of their land are a people without control of their future. That is why they try to buy it, lease it, control it with laws written in languages we do not speak. But here we say the land belongs to those who feed the nation, and we will guard it as fiercely as we guard our own children. Because once you lose the land, you lose more than territory. You lose the heartbeat of the nation. And as long as that heartbeat remains in our soil, Africa will rise again. I have walked into classrooms where the walls were bare, where the chalk was so thin it broke in the teacher's fingers, where the books spoke of kings and queens from faraway lands, but said nothing of the warriors, inventors, and builders who walked our own soil. I have seen children reciting lessons that prepare them to serve others, but never to lead themselves. This was not an accident. For decades, the system was designed to produce minds that could repeat answers, but never ask questions. It was built to train our youth to fit into a machine they did not build, a machine that feeds on their labor, but never gives them ownership. And so, generation after generation, our brightest minds were exported. Engineers to build foreign cities, doctors to heal foreign bodies, scientists to serve foreign research. Our schools became factories of dependency, turning our own children into a product for someone else's profit. We refused to accept this. We began rewriting the curriculum, replacing the lies with truths, replacing foreign myths with our own history. We brought our elders into the classroom so that the wisdom of centuries would not die with them. We taught our children the science of their own environment, how to use the wind, the sun, the soil, and the rivers to solve problems here, not somewhere else. We introduced technical training alongside academic learning so that a student could graduate not just with a certificate, but with a skill, the ability to build, to repair, to innovate. We created programs where students worked on real projects in their own communities, building solar panels for rural clinics, designing irrigation systems for farms, developing small manufacturing workshops powered by local resources. Because true education is not about memorizing someone else's answers. It is about giving our youth the tools to write their own, and I saw the change. Children who once dreamed only of leaving began dreaming of staying, not because they lacked ambition, but because they had a mission. They saw opportunity where once there was only scarcity. They spoke not only of jobs, but of enterprises. They began to understand that they were not just inheriting a country, they were shaping it. The old system told them, your future is somewhere else. Our new system tells them, your future is here, if you are willing to build it. And here is the truth. The most dangerous person in the eyes of those who wish to control us is not the soldier with a gun. It is the child who can think for themselves. That is why education is our first battlefield. It is where independence is either born or buried. We will teach our children to read, not just words, but the world. We will teach them to write, not just letters, but history. And when they graduate, they will not leave as servants of another man's empire. They will leave as architects of their own. I have traveled across this land, from the dusty villages in the north to the crowded streets in the south, and I have seen something that gives me more hope than any speech or promise. I have seen the faces of our people when they stand together. You can feel it in the air when a market trader shares her last bowl of millet with a neighbor, when a mechanic fixes a stranger's bicycle for nothing more than a thank you, when farmers gather under the shade of a tree to discuss how they will plant for the season. Not for themselves, but for the community. This is the spirit they fear. Because the colonial mind knows how to control individuals, but it trembles in the face of a united people. This is why they spend fortunes to divide us, tribe against tribe, religion against religion, language against language. They give one group a little more and starve another, so that the fight is never with them, but always among ourselves. And while we fight each other, they quietly take everything. But I tell you today, No foreign hand can break us unless we first break ourselves. Unity is not a slogan we chant at rallies. It is the work we do every day to see each other as brothers and sisters, even when we disagree. It is the decision to solve our problems together, not to run to outsiders for mediation. It is the courage to defend not only our own rights, but the rights of those who cannot defend themselves. I have seen the power of this unity. When a flood destroyed a village in the east, people from hundreds of kilometers away came with food, clothes, and their own hands to rebuild. When we announced the first locally built boiler, it was not just the engineers who celebrated. It was the farmers, the drivers, the welders, the schoolchildren, because they knew it was not just an invention, it was a victory for all of us. And here is the secret they will never teach in their schools. A united people is richer than a land full of gold, because gold can be stolen, oil can be taken, but unity cannot be extracted, exported, or exploited. It is the one wealth that grows stronger the more you share it. We will disagree, we will argue, we will even fight, but we will do so as a family does, with the knowledge that we are bound by something greater than our differences. We must remember that the enemy is not the man across the river or the woman who prays differently. The enemy is the hand that keeps us from building the bridge to cross that river together. And so, I say to every African, stand with your neighbor, because one day you will need them to stand with you. And when we stand as one, there is no force on this earth that can move us. For too long, others have told our story for us. They have written books about us, filmed documentaries about us, printed newspapers about us, and yet, when you read them, you find a stranger on the page. They describe Africa as a land of endless suffering, as if poverty is our identity and war is our natural language. They choose the images they want the world to see: the hungry child, the cracked earth, the desperate eyes. And every time they do, they steal another piece of our dignity. They never show the mornings when the sun paints the horizon gold over our fields, when the laughter of children spills through the alleys, when our elders tell stories that carry the wisdom of centuries. They never show the brilliance of our young minds designing machines in small workshops, or the courage of our farmers who plant in faith, even when the rains are late. Because to show that truth would shatter the lie they have built. We must understand, whoever controls the narrative controls the future. If they tell the world we are weak, then the world will treat us as weak. If they convince our own youth that their only hope is to leave, then they will drain us of our best and brightest. That is why it is not enough to resist militarily or economically. We must also fight in the battlefield of words, images, and ideas. Reclaiming our narrative begins with telling our own stories, in our own voices, through our own eyes. It means that the farmer in the village understands that his work is part of a story bigger than himself. A story of resilience, not desperation. It means that the young filmmaker in the city realizes she is not just making movies, she is shaping how the next generation will see themselves. It means that the teacher in the classroom knows that every lesson is a brick in the foundation of a new African mind. When we control our story, we control how we are remembered. And memory is power. The colonizers wrote themselves as the saviors in history and wrote us as the ones who needed saving. We must write a new chapter, one where we are the authors, the heroes, and the guardians of our destiny. And let us remember this: the world is watching. Every achievement, every act of unity, every innovation, these are not small victories. They are chapters in a book that will one day be read by our children and their children. Let them read a story of dignity, courage, and triumph. Let them see a people who refuse to let others define them. The pen is in our hands now, and when Africa writes her own story, the world will not just read it. The world will rise to meet it. There comes a moment in every struggle when the night feels endless, when the shadows seem thicker than the light, when the weight of history presses so heavily on your shoulders that you wonder if the dawn will ever come. Africa has lived through many such nights. We have endured centuries of chains, decades of exploitation, years of being told we are too broken to stand. And yet, here we are, still breathing, still standing, still daring to dream. But dawn does not arrive on its own. It is not a gift from the sky. Dawn is built brick by brick, choice by choice, sacrifice by sacrifice. It is born from the hands of those who refuse to surrender to the darkness. And that, my brothers and sisters, is our calling now, to become the builders of the dawn. This is not the work of one leader or one generation. It is the work of all of us, the youth who refuse to be seduced by false promises abroad, the farmers who treat the soil not as a relic of the past, but as the engine of the future, the engineers who look at scrap metal and see machines, the mothers who raise their children with pride in their heritage, so that no one can make them feel small. The dawn we build will not be measured only in roads, schools, and factories, though we will build them all. It will be measured in the spirit of a people who know their worth, in the quiet confidence that comes from owning the fruits of your labor, in the joy of knowing that the food on your table was grown in your soil, by your hands, for your children. And let me tell you this, those who have fed on Africa's weakness will fear this dawn. Because when a people rise, those who lived off their knees lose their power. They will try to cloud the sky with lies. They will send their messengers to whisper doubt into your ears. They will point to every setback and say, "See, you are not ready," but we will answer them not with words, but with results. Every project we complete, every child we educate, every community we empower will be a torch in the darkness. One torch becomes two, two become 10, 10 become 1,000, until the night itself cannot survive the light. And when that day comes, when the sun finally breaks over a continent standing tall, we will look back at this moment and know that it was here, in the hard, unglamorous work, in the sacrifices that no one applauded, in the unity that no one believed possible, that the dawn was truly born. The future will not be imported. It will not be loaned to us. It will not be granted by those who profited from our suffering. The future will be built here by us, with our hands, our hearts, and our unshakable belief that Africa is not just a place on the map. It is the rising sun of the world.